Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. I want to talk for a little bit about the murder of these American citizens in Mexico a couple of days ago. I was surprised for a couple of reasons because, first and foremost, people are murdered in this country every single day. People are murdered in Mexico and Venezuela. I mean, there's not a country in the world, I don't think, where there isn't a murder, at least once a day somewhere. I think the reason these murders stuck out in our mind and caught the collective attention of the nation is that they were American citizens on foreign soil, first and foremost. Second of all, it involved, as the story goes, a woman and her children, and including the murder of children by Mexican drug cartels. And as one of the stories goes, the woman driving one of the vehicles got out of her car, put her hands up as if to surrender, and was shot on sight. So the circumstances surrounding this mass murder of American citizens by the drug cartels has, I think, finally shot the subject of Mexico's declining state into the headlines. You may recall, and I should have checked before I started recording, but I talked about Mexico as a failed state just within the past week. I want to read to you from a Facebook post about the murders. It's disturbing. On the morning of November 4, 2019, 3 mothers and 3 vehicles with 14 children between them set out for La Mora, a small family community in the mountains of northeastern Sonora. 2 of them to see family in Chihuahua, and 1 of them to pick up her husband from the airport in Phoenix. They never made it. They were ambushed by the Mexican cartels, shot, burned, and murdered in cold blood. These were innocent civilians, American citizens simply trying to live peaceful lives. For 11 hours, their families all over Sonora, Chihuahua, and the Midwestern U.S. waited in fear and horror for any news of possible survivors. The first vehicle was found full of bullet holes and completely ablaze. Nita and the 4 of her 7 children she had taken on the trip were burned to mostly ashes, and only a few charred bones left to identify all 5 had been inside. It appeared that 1 tried to escape as the front passenger door was open and the remains were partially in and out of the vehicle. The Facebook post continues. On another part of the road, about 10 miles ahead, were Christina with her baby Faith in her vehicle and Donna with 9 children in hers. They both were fired upon from ahead, and Christina jumped out waving her arms to let the attackers know that it was women and children in the vehicles. She gave her life to try and save the rest. Donna and 2 of her boys were also killed in the gunfire. After witnessing his mother and brothers being shot dead, Donna's son Devin hid his 6 other siblings in the bushes and covered them with branches to keep them safe while he went for help. When he took too long to return, his 9-year-old sister left the remaining 5 to try again. Devin arrived in La Mora at 5:30 p.m., 6 hours after the ambush, giving the first news anyone had heard of his and Christina's family. Devin's uncles armed themselves with guns and returned to try and find the hidden children, knowing many of them were injured. They didn't get far before realizing they would be risking death, since there had been continual shooting for hours all over the mountains near La Mora. The group of men waited for a while for reinforcements, and around 7:30, they found the hidden children. They found Christina's baby Faith with the vehicle around her riddled with bullet holes. Somehow, she had remained untouched and alive. She was in her car seat, which looked to have been hurriedly placed on the floor of the vehicle by her mother, seeking to protect her. Now, the search didn't end there, the story says. Mackenzie, the 9-year-old who had gone for help, was missing. Soldiers who had by then arrived, and the men of Lamora and nearby towns, searched for 2 hours in the dark until they found her around 9:30 p.m. The 5 of Donna's children who were injured and were picked up by a waiting ambulance and treated at the local hospital until a helicopter sent by Mexican military came to pick them up. Their father, David, who had by then arrived from Tucson, accompanied them to be life-flighted, to another helicopter waiting at the U.S. border, and from there to be transported on to Phoenix. Devin, his brother Jake, and Christina's baby Faith, all uninjured, are now in the care of their aunts and grandmothers in Lamora. We lost 9 today, she writes. Right now we are waiting for the morning for answers for justice. And then she lists the dead. What are we to make of this? The ambush is part of a surge of violence in the region. And whatever the motivation here, mistaken identity, revenge for something we don't yet know, the brutal outcome of the slaughter of young women and children, including twins who had not even had their first birthday, is shocking if you haven't been paying attention. And most Americans, thanks to a media establishment that cares more about the Middle East than about our next-door neighbor Mexico, has not been paying attention. The American family that was gunned down Monday in northern Mexico ought to be a wake-up call for United States policymakers that the spiraling cartel violence in Mexico is not going to remain south of the Rio Grande, and that the time has come to fight back against the cartels, and quite frankly, unilaterally if need be. Simply put, some areas of Mexico are under de facto control of drug cartels. Last month, hundreds of gunmen from the Sinaloa cartel besieged the city of Culiacan. We talked about this in the podcast. After Mexican National Guard troops arrested one of the sons of the infamous drug kingpin, El Chapo. In a stunning display of coordination and overwhelming force, cartel gunmen eventually forced the Mexican military to release El Chapo's son and surrender. The Mexican military surrendered. A decision that, as I told you in the earlier podcast, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador defended. The attack on Monday in the northern Mexico state of Sonora targeted the LeBaron family. They're members of a Mormon community of dual Mexican and American citizens who have lived on the border for decades. Now, it's unclear why the caravan of 3 vehicles came under fire, but the gruesome news reports detailed the intentional slaughter of defenseless women and children. They were burned to death inside their cars. Some family members told the New York Times that one child was gunned down while running away, shot in the back. So this story has caught national attention, has led to President Trump on Tuesday calling on President Obrador to wage war on the cartels, to, quote, wipe them off the face of the earth. And he's offered American assistance, saying it sometimes takes, quote, an army to defeat an army. Now, of course, President Obrador was quick to decline the offer. He says it's not in agreement with our convictions. That's like when people say, this is not our values. The Mexican president said the worst thing is war. What the hell does he think's going on? That's what's happening in Mexico right now, is a war. When he says the worst thing is war, he's actually echoing slogans he often repeats about cartel violence and ending the drug war like hugs, not gunshots, and you can't fight fire with fire. Now, when he won the presidency last year, President Obrador all but declared an end to the drug war, saying that he would instead tackle the root causes of cartel violence, which he says are poverty and the lack of opportunity. Yet his main security policy has been the creation of the National Guard, a 60,000-strong force largely comprised of military and naval police, as well as former officers from Mexico's famously corrupt federal police, the Federales. It was a contingent of National Guard troops that was actually defeated by the Sinaloa cartel gunmen in Culiacan. And to date, that National Guard force has mostly been used to patrol northern and southern borders, trying to crack down on illegal immigration from Central America. But in the aftermath of the Battle of Culiacan, and then this week's massacre of American women and children, Obrador's platitudes and lackluster policies actually ring hollow. You see, Mexico is now facing record-breaking levels of violence as the cartels grow more assertive in the face of government inaction. I think it ought to be clear by now that no matter how bad the violence gets, the Mexican president is not going to do anything about the cartels. Nothing. I think that means the United States might have to act. And for the United States, I've always said border security is a matter of national security. And we should approach border security as that, as an issue of national security, not an issue of left versus right, not an issue of whether we want immigrants or don't want immigrants. We need immigrants in this country. We have always welcomed immigrants. We have just always had a system by which if you wanted to come to the United States, you had to meet certain requirements, you had to meet, certain standards, and you had to come here in an orderly fashion. What's happening on the southern border right now is an absolute failure to recognize that border security is indeed an issue of national security. How long before the Sinaloa cartels start operating? Well, quite frankly, they already are. But to my point, how quickly do we start seeing more mass murders of Americans on American soil by Mexican cartels? In an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, they write that military options cannot and should not be ruled out. The journal says this: the details of the murders are shocking, but the truth is that such mayhem is an everyday occurrence in Mexico. A Council on Foreign Relations paper updated on October 22 reports that murders are soaring in the country, often linked to the drug cartels. Homicides reached a new high of 36,000 in 2018, and this year murders have averaged, are you ready for this? Murders have averaged 90 every single day. The journal says the border states of Sonora and Chihuahua are crucial to the cartels because of their access to the United States and the gigantic American market for illegal drugs. The killings of police in Sonora have doubled this year to about 20, according to Mexico consulting firm Impra. The gangs are ruthless. They're going to murder anybody that interferes, along with their families. Last month, some 35 Mexican police and National Guard troops were forced to release El Chapo's son. The hard truth that Americans just don't pay any attention to, the media fails to report it, we don't have any sort of national conversation about it, is that Mexico is dangerously close to being a failed state. And despite the country's economic advances, it's not far off in terms of being a failed state with complete failure of their security systems. The mayhem that we've witnessed should be a wake-up call. I'm not sure that American military forces need to engage the cartels in Mexico. I am convinced that American military may have to engage the cartels on American soil. That comes with a lot of dangers. That comes with a lot of unintended consequences. The Insurrection Act, the law of posse comitatus, all prevent American troops from engaging in military activities on American soil. The United States military is designed to defend us. But I wonder, as one who wanted to use the military during Katrina to do all sorts of things, I wonder if the time hasn't come to send the military, not necessarily because of an immigration issue, but because a failed state on our southern border will result in a flood of refugees like we have never seen before. And what is our role if Mexico collapses? We'll have to do something. We can't allow China. We can't allow Russia. Venezuela's incapable, but we can't allow Venezuela. We'll have to go in. We need to start thinking about that. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. You can download on the iHeart app on iTunes, but I would ask you to do me a favor. Copy the link to the podcast, share it on your social media, tweet it out, email it to friends. Make people aware of what's going on our southern border. It's not about immigration. Sure, immigration is an issue, but I think we're about to face a failed state on our southern border. Where's the media? You can help spread the word.